In June 2023, 28-year-old hiker Ethan Cole vanished without a trace on a familiar trail section in the Mojave Desert. For 2 years, he was presumed dead, a victim of the brutal heat or an unwitnessed accident. But on the morning of June 14, 2025, he walked into a remote gas station in California, alive, but almost unrecognizable. What investigators later discovered in a secret tunnel network beneath the Mojave would make even the most seasoned experts shudder. Where Ethan had been for those 2 years and what really happened to him, you'll find out in this video. Some names and details in the story have been changed to protect identities and privacy. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Mornings in the Mojave Desert are never gentle on people. By 7 a.m., the sun already hung on the horizon like a white-hot blaze, shining down on the sandstone ridges and heating them until they gave off that distinctive, dry, scorched smell. Winds from the northeast blew through the low creosote bushes close to the ground, dragging fine sand along in swirling streams and whistling softly through rock hollows as if the place were breathing through an endless wide throat. It was on one such harsh morning that Ethan Cole appeared at the Rock Spring Loop trailhead. He stepped out of his vehicle with the familiar manner of someone who had wandered these desert routes many times. No hurry, no confusion, but alert enough to notice the smallest weather changes. Ethan carried a small backpack, a large water bottle clipped to his belt with a carabiner, hiking boots worn down at the heels from years of use, and a wide-brimmed hat for sun protection. To anyone watching from a distance, he would have looked like just an ordinary hiker preparing for a routine early morning trek. But the parking lot security camera captured one detail that later made investigators pause the footage frame by frame. Ethan stood motionless in front of the trailhead marker, eyes fixed on a rock formation a few dozen meters away. His focus was unusually intense, head slightly tilted as if trying to catch a faint sound. In the recording, his breathing seemed to slow, and his right hand unconsciously gripped the backpack strap, tightening briefly before releasing. He glanced back once, as if making sure no one was following him, then returned his gaze to the rocks without looking away. An older hiking couple who arrived later and passed by Ethan said they heard him say very quietly, almost only to himself, "Someone is calling me from over there." The couple thought he might be talking on earbuds or joking, since desert winds can sometimes create echoing sounds that resemble distant calls. But when they looked closer, Ethan's expression showed no hint of humor. His eyes were deep and strained, as if he were truly trying to pinpoint a voice in the scorching, silent emptiness of the Mojave. There was no one in the area, just wind and sand. At exactly 9:47 a.m., according to the camera timestamp, Ethan adjusted his backpack straps, tightened his laces, and stepped onto the Rock Spring Loop trail. He walked straight ahead without looking back, his figure gradually shrinking among the yucca trees and creosote bushes. Just seconds later, he disappeared from the security camera's view. And that was the last image anyone had of him. Throughout the afternoon, the Mojave burned like an oven. Ethan's phone showed no activity, no outgoing calls, no sent messages, no GPS signal. By late afternoon, his family still hadn't heard from him. They called repeatedly, but the phone only said it was unreachable. Ethan always checked in after hiking, even on short trips. So by 7 p.m., worry turned to panic. By 9 p.m., no one could stay calm. At 11:32 p.m., after dozens of unanswered calls, the family officially contacted the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. They reported that Ethan Cole, 28 years old, with extensive hiking experience, had gone missing in the Mojave that morning and left absolutely no trace. That night, the desert felt wider than ever. The missing person call came in near midnight, as the sudden Mojave cold began to sweep down, covering the ground in a thin, dry frost like smoke. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department immediately activated initial search protocols, since the loss of contact had lasted more than 12 hours, and Ethan was known as an experienced and responsible hiker, making his silence far more alarming. That night, a rapid response team, SAR search and rescue personnel, and 2 night rangers were dispatched to the Rock Spring Loop trailhead. Powerful flashlights swept across the red dirt, each grain of sand reflecting the white light like tiny metal specks. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. Someone disappearing in the Mojave Desert after dark was an extremely dangerous situation. They began scanning the parking area, noting the position of Ethan's vehicle and checking for signs of struggle, forced entry, or abandoned personal items. Everything was inexplicably clean. No signs of disturbance, no skid marks, nothing out of place. Just a thin layer of dust on the car, and Ethan's footprints leading away from the lot that morning. Ranger Cahill, who had worked in the Mojave for over 18 years, commented, "If something happened, it happened deeper on the trail." Around 2 a.m., the SAR team began searching in the direction Ethan had gone. Though night conditions weren't ideal, they pressed on because temperatures the next morning could exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, drastically reducing survival chances if Ethan was injured. Near mile 1.4 of the trail, one SAR member shouted, "Tracks here." Everyone gathered. On the softer ground, under portable floodlights, two sets of parallel footprints appeared. One belonged to Ethan. His hiking boots had a distinctive sole pattern the family had described. The other set didn't match any trail running shoe the rescue team had ever seen. The spacing between the sets was also strange. They didn't look like two people walking together, nor like someone deliberately tailing another. Instead, they ran almost perfectly parallel for about 25 yards, as if two people were walking side by side without interacting. Then suddenly, the second set of footprints stopped. They simply vanished midway through the sandy soil. No turnaround marks, no slides, no change in direction. Just gone. Ranger Cahill knelt down and lightly touched the indentation. "These aren't from any commercial shoe. The pattern doesn't match anything common. Not military, not work boots, not forest footwear." The SAR team exchanged glances. Who was the second person? Where had they come from? And why did their footprints end so abruptly, as if sliced off with a knife? Another ranger offered an initial theory. Maybe they stepped onto rock or harder sand, but the surrounding area was all soft soil, with no large rocks to hide the next step. Anyone leaving the area would have left prints, but there were none. Ranger Cahill noted, "The second set has a longer stride than Ethan's by about 5 to 7 centimeters, with deeper weight impression. This person was taller, heavier. What sent chills down the team's spines wasn't just the footprints, but the direction. Both sets headed deeper into the trail, with no signs of pursuit. Yet the force pattern suggested the second person was observing Ethan rather than walking beside him. As if watching him, someone was following Ethan," Cahill said firmly, no longer guessing. Investigators immediately raised the case severity. This was no longer a lost hiker or heat exhaustion. This was a disappearance involving possible human intervention. SAR continued tracking Ethan's prints a few hundred more meters. His footprints remained clear, but they moved into increasingly unstable terrain where soft soil suddenly gave way to harder rock. Each step the search team took echoed dryly under the freezing sky, moonlight glinting off rock faces like silver blades. Near 4 a.m., with temperatures dropping close to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the SAR team paused to plan for morning. Ranger Cahill stood in the Mojave darkness, looking toward the distant black rock ridges. He said slowly, "Ethan's tracks are still there. But the person walking with him, I don't think it was someone random." And in the desert silence, that thought grew larger. Ethan hadn't been alone. Someone had followed him into the Mojave and then vanished without a trace. No one on the team knew this was only the first clue to something far stranger waiting ahead. The next morning, as the first sunlight hit the ground and heated it up in just minutes, the investigation team returned to the trailhead area where Ethan had parked his car. The Mojave wind blew stronger, whipping thin streams of sand across the asphalt road and tapping lightly against car windows with faint clicking sounds. Ethan's Subaru Forester was still parked in its original spot, neat and showing no signs of forceful external impact. That caught the investigators' attention. Usually in sudden disappearances, the victim's vehicle shows signs of rummaging, prying, or at least strange fingerprints on the surface. But Ethan's car was clean to an almost unnatural degree. Ranger Cahill circled the vehicle, bending down to check the wheel wells and the ground underneath. No mud traces. No other tire marks from a vehicle parked close before. No indication that Ethan had been blocked or that someone tried to approach him in the lot. Everything suggested Ethan arrived, locked the car, and walked onto the trail without any incident. But that normality didn't last long. When a forensic technician bent down to examine the driver's side door handle with a UV light, he spotted a faint gray streak stuck to the lower edge of the handle, barely visible to the naked eye, but under the angled glare of harsh sunlight, the dust reflected a pale metallic sheen. He called everyone over. "Something's here." Ranger Cahill put on gloves and stepped closer. The technician used a cotton swab to collect the sample, gently wiping. What came off on the swab tip was a fine powder-like chalk, a silvery gray metallic dust, completely unlike the yellowish-brown sand of the Mojave. Not natural dust, Cahill observed. When the sample was taken to the field lab for quick analysis, the results forced the team to rethink their approach to the case. The powder on Ethan's door handle wasn't sand, wasn't soil, and wasn't friction residue from the car itself. It was a compound metallic powder containing iron oxide and nickel alloy flakes, material typically found in areas where military equipment is handled, especially zones used for dismantling or maintaining mechanical gear. The forensic technician explained clearly, "This is from an industrial or military environment. The Mojave doesn't have this on its natural surface." That raised a major question. Who or what had touched Ethan's car door? On the vehicle's surface, beyond that metallic dust, there were no clear fingerprints. It appeared whoever left the trace had worn gloves or used something indirect to contact the handle. No pry marks, no scratches around the lock, no signs of searching. The interior was intact. Personal items complete. Wallet, cash, watch, sunglasses, documents all exactly where Ethan had left them. That indicated the person who touched the car wasn't there to steal. Ranger Cahill sat down by the door, lightly touching the ground. The wind swept through again, carrying the dry desert smell mixed with the familiar hot metal scent of the parking lot. If they didn't rummage the car, didn't force the door, then what were they here for? No one answered, but everyone understood his thinking. Someone may have arrived before Ethan, or right after he did, made quick contact with the vehicle, and left. A field technician analyzed the dust placement. Based on the amount, this person didn't stand there long. Maybe they just grabbed the handle once briefly. That complicated the initial clues even more. If someone had been near Ethan's car before he left, why didn't the parking lot camera capture them? Upon reviewing the footage, it only showed Ethan arriving and looking eastward. No other person appeared in frame. However, the camera angle didn't cover the entire lot among the other vehicles. There were blind spots. A new line of thinking emerged. It was very possible someone approached Ethan's car from a hidden angle, touched the handle, and left before Ethan got close. That fit the powder sample. It could only come from someone who had recently handled mechanical equipment or come from a military-type area. A young forensic technician stated bluntly, "This kind of powder isn't something ordinary civilians carry around. To have it, you'd need contact with industrial gear or military machinery." That shifted the case away from a simple disappearance and into murkier territory. The possibility of a second person's involvement. Someone who approached Ethan, or his car, before he vanished. Ranger Cahill stood quietly for a moment by the door, looking down at the sandy lot as the sunlight grew increasingly intense. If that person touched Ethan's car, they saw him, or at least, they knew Ethan was coming. Those words, in the heat blasting down like a furnace, made no one on the team feel comfortable. In the Mojave, people rarely do anything without a reason. By the second day of the search operation, as the Mojave sun poured down a white glare so harsh it made the air shimmer like heat waves, the SAR team split into 4 directions, expanding the search radius more than 12 miles around the trail Ethan had taken. The wind blew harder, whipping fine sand into curving streaks across the ground and nearly erasing all footprints left from the night before. In such a brutal environment, finding any human trace was almost a matter of luck. But around 11 a.m., An urgent signal came from the Western Search Group. "We have evidence. Looks like the victim's backpack." Ranger Cahill immediately directed the whole team to the reported coordinates. That area was more than 9 miles off the main trail, far beyond the range Ethan was expected to cover. It was a rugged, rocky hill zone, treacherous terrain completely isolated from official paths. Almost no one veered in there unless they had very high experience or were deliberately avoiding trails. When the team arrived, the sight before them silenced everyone for several seconds. Ethan's backpack, moss green, the distinctive style his family had described, lay right in the middle of a flat clearing, surrounded by large, upright boulders like natural walls. But the backpack wasn't tossed haphazardly or blown aside by wind. It had been placed straight and neatly, as if someone deliberately set it in the most visible spot. That immediately didn't fit the natural logic of the Mojave. Winds here were strong enough to blow dry branches around, let alone leave a light backpack untouched for hours, unless it was carefully positioned in a wind-sheltered spot. SAR immediately cordoned off the scene. No one approached the backpack until forensics arrived. But another strange detail emerged. Around the clearing, there were no clear footprints, only swirling sand patterns dragged by wind. No path in, no steps out, as if the backpack had appeared there without anyone setting foot nearby. When the forensic technician approached, he gloved up and bent to examine the straps. The dust on them showed the backpack had been carried in dry, windy conditions. Uneven adhesion with small friction marks from rubbing against something hard. After confirming no traps or sharp hazards, he unzipped it and checked inside. Half-empty water bottle, multifunction cloth, folding knife, first aid kit, lighter, an unopened protein bar, paper map, all matching what Ethan had taken. However, when opening the rear compartment, the technician froze. In the middle of the black fabric lining was a single hair. It was nearly 8 inches long, silvery gray, slightly curled at the end. A foreign genetic sample in Ethan's belongings from a man with short, dark brown hair can't belong to Ethan, the technician said firmly. Ranger Cahill stared at the hair for a long moment. Its silvery gray stood out under the blinding sun, creating an inexplicably eerie feeling. Elderly hair often has a coarser texture, and light curling at the tips. This matched the strand's shape. An older person, someone who had touched Ethan's backpack. The fact that a stranger had opened it was already serious, but what came next was even harder to comprehend. When forensics gently lifted the backpack to check underneath, the soil stuck to the bottom immediately made him frown. This soil wasn't the color of the area where the backpack was found. It was a deep reddish-brown layer, fine-grained with tiny mineral flecks completely different from the pale yellow sandy soil with rock fragments typical of the northern Mojave. "Take a sample," Cahill said at once. A field soil test was conducted quickly, and the results, back in 20 minutes, left the entire team speechless. The soil under the backpack matched 92% with samples from the southern Mojave, an area nearly 40 miles away. That was a region with ancient strata, iron oxide-rich red dirt that couldn't naturally appear in the northern Mojave where they stood. The backpack has been there, forensics concluded. That led to a bizarre reality. Ethan disappeared in the morning. Less than 48 hours had passed, yet his backpack had traveled through terrain nearly 40 miles away, a distance no one could cover on foot that quickly. Even if Ethan had left the trail, the rugged terrain and extreme heat would make such rapid, long-distance travel nearly impossible. Meaning, someone had moved the backpack. Someone with endurance, skills, or tools to cross the Mojave without leaving footprints around the scene. "This person knows the desert," Ranger Cahill said slowly, "and knows how to leave as few traces as possible." Another technician added, "The way the backpack was placed neat, clean, doesn't look like discarding. It looks like someone wanted us to find it." No one dared say more. In the desert, wind swept through the boulders, creating long howling sounds like someone whispering from afar. Ethan's backpack, the only direct link to him since the disappearance, had been found. But it didn't reveal where Ethan was. It only said Ethan hadn't been alone, and the person with him had touched, moved, and placed this backpack down with a purpose no one could yet understand. That same afternoon when the backpack was found, as the SAR team was planning to expand the search southward toward the area where the red soil on the backpack indicated it had been. The group covering the lower valley 3 miles away suddenly reported a new discovery. "We have electronic equipment. Looks like a phone." The announcement made everyone freeze. Ethan always carried his phone when hiking, not just for photos, but also for GPS tracking. If the device was found, it could be the most crucial piece yet. Ranger Cahill immediately led the team to the reported location. The find spot was wedged between two large boulders, forming a narrow natural crevice, where wind didn't blow strongly and sand couldn't easily bury it. Ethan's iPhone lay tilted on the ground, dusty and lightly scratched along the edges but with an intact screen. The first thing that caught the team's attention: it was positioned unnaturally. If it had fallen, it would be face down or rolled to one side. But the phone was placed neatly, as if someone had set it down gently. Forensics carefully picked up the device with gloved hands. They tried turning it on, but the phone gave no response. Not dead battery, but as if the internal power circuit was gone. At the temporary checkpoint, they removed the case and used specialized tools to open the back. And as soon as the cover was lifted, the technician exhaled sharply. The GPS has been removed. Beneath the main board, the component where the GPS module connects had been detached with precise force. No broken chips, no major scratches. This removal wasn't rushed or random destruction. It required specialized tools and someone who understood the phone's hardware structure. Not an ordinary person. Not a hiker. This was the kind of operation done by someone experienced in repairing devices. A professional technician, or a person trained in a military or industrial environment. Ranger Cahill examined the board under the glaring sun. No one removes a GPS to save themselves in the desert. That meant someone didn't want Ethan's phone to be tracked. But why would a stranger disable a hiker's GPS? Forensics continued analyzing, attempting to extract logs from the remaining active chips. After nearly an hour of processing, they accessed the system data. In the connection log, one final entry made everyone stand still for several seconds. At 10:13 a.m., less than 30 minutes after Ethan stepped onto the trail, the phone had pinged a cell tower right on the edge of an abandoned military outpost from the 90s called Prospector Ridge Outpost. It was a site once used by the military for testing communication equipment, now closed and outside civilian access for years. There was no reason for Ethan to go near that area. It was dozens of miles from his route. And even more chilling, after that ping, the entire GPS log stopped as if cut with a knife. Not powered off, not lost signal, but disabled. And this happened within the time frame when Ethan was still seen walking normally. Ranger Cahill pulled out the map and marked the GPS ping location. Ethan's phone sent a signal here at 10:13, but the camera shows him on the trail at 9:47, and there's no way he could have gotten that far that fast. One SAR member said quietly, "Someone took the phone in a different direction." But the bigger question still hung in the air. Who was that person? And why involve an abandoned military outpost? Forensics kept examining the exterior. Along the phone's edges were distinctive scratch marks, not from rock or sand, but like brief rubbing against metal. One technician noted, "These scratches look like it was tossed into a tool bag or bumped against a steel equipment case." That matched the metallic dust found on Ethan's car door handle, dust from an industrial or military setting. The coincidence made the atmosphere around the temporary station palpably tense. Ranger Cahill stared at the lifeless phone on the metal table, as if it were trying to say something humans couldn't hear. "No one removes a hiker's GPS without a reason," he said slowly, "especially when the device pings an abandoned military outpost right before it's sabotaged." Another member asked, "If someone took the phone, what about Ethan? Did they separate him from his belongings?" But no one answered. The Mojave wind blew harder, sweeping through the ravine with a long whistling sound. The phone, this fragile link in the harsh desert, had told them three things. Ethan didn't lose his items by accident. The device was intentionally disabled, and someone, with technical-level expertise, had handled the phone before leaving it among the rocky hills. This was no longer a lost hiker case. This was the action of a person with intent, and that person had been with Ethan, or following him in the moment he vanished from the Mojave. When Ethan's phone was confirmed to have been intentionally disabled, the investigation team decided to return deeper into the trail to follow the direction his footprints had led them from the first night. The two sets of parallel footprints discovered earlier still haunted everyone, especially the way the second set vanished abruptly, defying any normal rules of desert movement. But there was one final section of Ethan's footprints the team hadn't yet analyzed in detail. The part where, that first night, the wind had been too strong, forcing them to turn back to avoid losing their bearings. Ranger Cahill led the forensics group back to the spot about 2 miles from where the backpack was found. This was where Ethan's footprints had still been clearly visible that first night, but later blurred by wind and sand. They hoped that on the morning of the third day, with the sun shining at an angle, the indentations would show more clearly. And they did. As the early light slanted across the area, the depressions in the dry, hard ground became sharper, forming a chain of footprints nearly 200 meters long, leading deep into unmapped wilderness. But then the chain of footprints stopped, not fading gradually, not covered by sand. It stopped suddenly, as if Ethan had walked to a specific point and then stopped walking. Ranger Cahill knelt to examine the final footprint closely. It was deeper than the previous ones, indicating he had put more force into the step, perhaps climbing slightly or stepping over an obstacle. The impression was clear. Toes still pointed straight ahead, no deviation left or right. But right after that print, the ground was completely smooth. No turnaround marks, no dragged heel marks, no slides in the sand, no sign whatsoever that Ethan had continued walking. If he turned back, there would be prints facing the opposite direction, one SAR member noted. If he slipped or fell, the soil would be disturbed, but everything was blank. Forensics used a probe to measure soil hardness. This area was unusually compact, like ground, repeatedly driven over in the past, or once subjected to heavy pressure. A geologist accompanying the team observed, "This resembles soil compacted by heavy wheels, or something artificial underneath." But this area was clearly never a vehicle path, nor near any ruins or old mine entrances. When cross-referencing the pre-sabotage GPS map from the phone, one detail sent chills down everyone's spine. The location of the final footprint lay almost directly in line with Prospector Ridge Outpost, the abandoned military site Ethan's phone had pinged. While the team stood analyzing, an expert tracker who had worked missing persons cases in Nevada was brought in. He circled the area, studying each impression, then stood motionless for a moment at the spot where the footprints ended. He knelt, lightly brushed the surface soil with his hand, feeling its firmness, then looked up and said something that silenced the entire group. He didn't leave on his own 2 feet. Ranger Cahill asked, "What do you mean? Dragged? Carried?" The tracker shook his head. If dragged, there would be furrows. If carried, there would be a second set of prints. But here there's nothing. No drops of sweat, no equipment touching ground, no slides. He pointed straight at the empty ground ahead. There are only 2 possibilities. Ethan was taken onto a vehicle, a silent stretch tight as wire, or taken away by someone in a way that left no trace. Another member frowned. Impossible. Carrying a 160-pound adult across the desert without leaving any footprints? The tracker didn't answer immediately. He walked another circle around the area, then said quietly but firmly, "I've tracked missing people for over 20 years. No one, I repeat, no one vanishes from the ground without leaving a trace. The only way to leave no trace is not to touch the ground." Forensics added, "If there was a vehicle, tires would leave marks, unless it was designed for extremely specialized terrain." Ranger Cahill took notes. Ethan headed down side trail, stopped at compacted ground dollar. No turnaround, no continuation, no slide mark set, no second-person prints, no vehicle marks. He stood up straight, gazing toward the low black mountain range on the horizon. The sunlight had now turned deep gold, casting long shadows of the rangers across the cracked earth like dead cacti. "Ethan didn't try to leave," Cahill said. "He was removed from this place." No one argued. The Mojave, in that moment, was eerily silent. Wind still blew, sand still drifted. The sun still blazed down, but in the middle of that empty patch where Ethan's footprints ended as if stepping into thin air, everyone felt the same thing. This was not a lost hiker. This was clear evidence of intervention. And wherever Ethan had gone, it wasn't by his own choice. After confirming that Ethan's footprints stopped unnaturally on the compacted ground, the investigation team expanded the search northeast into an area with deep rock crevices and long sand ridges, where the Mojave wind often blows hard, creating strange sunken terrain pockets. Such a spot could hold evidence that wind couldn't carry away. The SAR team spread out in a line, advancing step by step, eyes constantly scanning the ground because any fragment could explain Ethan's disappearance. Only when the sun was nearly overhead did they get a report from the group at the edge of a large crevice. Metal object found. It has markings. The words immediately made Ranger Cahill speed up. In a disappearance where human traces vanished without any natural logic, the appearance of a numbered metal object was usually significant. The crevice where the evidence was found was narrow, like a deep natural trench, wide enough for wind to slip through but enclosed enough to retain anything heavier than sand. The object lay close to the rock edge, covered by a thin layer of dust. When the forensic technician gently blew it off, a small metal tag gleamed in the sunlight. It was the exact size of a military identification tag, a dog tag. Several engraved lines became clearly visible. Henry Walker, US Army, 1974. The air around them froze for a moment. Ranger Cahill repeated the name, low and grave, Henry Walker. An older team member, Simmons, who had worked the area for nearly 30 years, looked up sharply. Walker? You sure? Henry Walker went missing in 1974, right here in the Mojave. A heavy silence fell like a stone in the ravine. Henry Walker was a name that had appeared in old files, but only as a faded story, an unsolved disappearance from a time when search technology was primitive. He vanished while working as a technician for a military testing unit on the desert's edge. His body was never found. There were no traces of where he went, and the case was closed in the 80s as a disappearance due to environmental factors. A cold case dormant for over 50 years. Yet his dog tag was lying in the Mojave, and lying exactly in the area where Ethan disappeared. No one on the team saw it as coincidence. Forensics examined the tag's surface. The metal was lightly scratched, but the structure and oxidation level showed it truly was decades old. It wasn't a replica, wasn't recreated. This was the real tag, the kind issued by the U.S. military during the Vietnam War era and afterward. The technician flipped the backside. Nothing except a faint wear mark, as if it had rubbed against fabric or a metal chain for many years. Someone left it here, Ranger Cahill said. Or someone carried it here. One member said quietly, Henry Walker was recorded missing in the southern desert, near the abandoned military outpost. That statement refocused the entire team on the most critical point. Ethan's phone had pinged a cell tower near the abandoned military outpost, and now they had found the dog tag of a man who disappeared when that outpost was still active. Ranger Cahill knelt to observe the tag's exact position. No footprints, no other items. Just the dog tag lying still, as if someone had deliberately left it or it had fallen from above at a moment no one witnessed. Forensics continued searching the crevice. One member used a blue light lamp to look for organic traces or contact marks. After a while, he spoke up. There's an old fabric fiber here. And, look, a scrape mark on the rock face. Ranger Cahill knelt to check. Old or new? Hard to tell, the technician replied. But this scrape has rust coloring. Most likely from an old metal object hitting it. Henry Walker had been wearing military uniform when he vanished. The metal clasps on his belt or chain could easily create a similar mark. But what no one could explain was why evidence from a nearly half-century-old disappearance was lying in a location directly tied to the current case. Simmons, who remembered the Walker case from years ago, said slowly, Back then, they searched for a whole month, found nothing but a few old tire tracks and one lone report of strange noises near the military outpost. Then they gave up. Cahill asked, Did anyone ever find any of his belongings? Never, Simmons answered. In that moment, the team understood they weren't just investigating one disappearance. They had dimly touched the shadow of another, a case the Mojave had long forgotten. A younger technician on the team said softly, almost to himself, "This means someone was carrying Walker's tag. Someone who had contact with him." But no one continued the thought aloud. Forensics carefully packaged the dog tag under special evidence protocols for historical military records. Ranger Cahill noted in his log, "Military dog tag Henry Walker, U.S. Army, 1974. Condition, old, naturally oxidized otter. Location found, rock crevice 9.4 miles from Trail Barrett. Site connection, near direction of abandoned Mojave military outpost." The desert then grew unusually quiet. No birds, no strong whistling wind. Only a dry, suffocating silence. Ranger Cahill stood motionless for a moment, then said, "This changes how we view the entire case. A lot. In a land where footprints can vanish in minutes, yet an old dog tag lay undisturbed for decades, no one on the team dared call it random. And the only question left, hanging in the scorching Mojave air, why did Henry Walker, who disappeared in 1974, appear in Ethan Cole's disappearance? That same afternoon, when Henry Walker's dog tag was found, the investigation team decided to expand the sweep radius around the crevice area by a few hundred more meters. Ranger Cahill believed that if one piece of evidence had been left behind, there could be other traces blown away from their original spots by the wind. They focused especially on wind-sheltered zones, places where sand couldn't easily sweep things away, like the leeward sides of large boulders or natural concave hollows. It was in one such small rock hollow that the forensics group found something that made the already tense atmosphere far heavier. "Fabric," one technician called out loudly. Everyone quickly gathered. Wedged in the hollow, caught in a narrow crack, was a torn piece of cloth. It was rolled up and stuck to the rock, as if blown hard by wind and snagged there. When gently pulled out, the harsh Mojave sunlight hit the fabric fibers, clearly revealing a deep reddish-brown stain soaked through the threads. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't rust. It was blood. And more importantly, blood fresh enough that the color hadn't fully faded. Forensics took a sample on the spot, swabbing the darkest blood area with a cotton bud. When the enzyme color test strip turned purple, they confirmed, human blood. A sudden silence spread. No one wanted to admit it, but everyone understood. The appearance of human blood in a missing person search area was always a bad sign. Ranger Cahill considered for a moment, then ordered the team back to the command tent for blood typing. They needed to know, was this Ethan's blood or not? Less than an hour later, the initial typing results left the entire team stunned. Blood type O positive. Ethan Cole had type A negative, according to hospital records and family confirmation. That meant the torn fabric did not belong to Ethan. One technician asked, "Could someone have been injured earlier and the blood just coincidentally ended up here?" But the lead forensic shook his head. "The color and dilution level show the blood isn't too old. It's partially oxidized, but proteins are still intact. I estimate no more than 72 hours. 72 hours, meaning within 3 days within the time frame very close to when Ethan disappeared. A stranger, not Ethan, had been in this area. That person was injured, and that person left blood right in the SAR search zone." Ranger Cahill noted the details, but what bothered him most was the condition of the fabric itself. It wasn't modern technical hiking material. Not nylon, polyester, or waterproof fabric. This was coarse woven cotton, the kind commonly found in old military jackets from the 60s and 70s. The same type issued to U.S. soldiers around the time Henry Walker disappeared. However, to be certain, forensics took a fabric sample for fiber analysis. Meanwhile, they continued DNA testing on the blood sample. The results didn't take long. When the comparison table appeared on the screen, the forensic technician frowned and said, "No match in any medical or criminal database. The blood belonged to an unidentified individual, not in criminal records, not in modern military records." Not in commercial genetic databases. No match to any recently reported missing persons in San Bernardino County or the Mojave area. Blood from an unknown person. An injured person. Right where Ethan was believed to have walked before vanishing. A person who left a 1974 dog tag just a few hundred meters from the fabric. This coincidence suddenly became too large to ignore. Simmons, the one who remembered the Walker case, clearly spoke in a hoarse voice. If this fabric sample is from old-era military uniform, then our problem is much bigger. Ranger Cahill didn't answer immediately. He turned back to the map spread on the table, where the evidence find spots were starting to form a non-random line. Backpack placed deliberately. Phone with GPS sabotaged. Footprints ending abruptly on compacted ground. No continuation. Identification tag of Henry Walker. A man missing for half a century appearing unexpectedly. And now, a torn fabric piece with fresh blood from a stranger. The lead forensic stated clearly. I can confirm this. There's no reason for this blood to appear in the desert dozens of miles from civilization, unless an injured person was moving through the area. One SAR member asked, "So, could this be the person with Ethan?" Ranger Cahill gripped his pen tightly, staring straight at the sealed fabric piece. "We can't conclude yet," he said. "But from this point forward, Ethan Cole's disappearance is officially shifted to suspected criminal involvement." The air in the command tent grew heavy like hot steel. The smell of dry sand mixed with the metallic scent of forensic tools made everyone feel a lump in their throat. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone realized Ethan hadn't just disappeared. Someone else had been with him. That someone was injured. That someone carried old items that didn't belong to the modern era. And that someone, whoever they were, did not want to be found. In that moment, amid the vast Mojave, the most frightening question wasn't where Ethan was. It was, where is the person with O-positive blood, and why did they appear in a desert area where no one was supposed to be? For the next 3 days, despite pouring in maximum resources and expanding the search radius in ever larger circles, SAR found no additional traces directly linked to Ethan. Daytime temperatures exceeded 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Nights dropped to just 40 degrees Fahrenheit, making continuous searching impossible. The Mojave wind grew stronger than forecast each afternoon, wiping away any new impressions in just hours. Areas that once held Ethan's footprints or the blood-stained fabric were now smooth ground, showing no sign humans had ever touched them. Though the investigation team successively deployed thermal drones, wide-angle fly cams, tracking dogs, and even ground-penetrating radar, every effort led to zero results. No body, no clothing, no new items, no continuing footprints beyond the point where Ethan vanished from the ground. All the traces from the backpack, the dog tag, to the bloodied fabric felt like scattered pieces of a puzzle that could not be assembled. The final SAR meeting in the Mojave on day 11 since Ethan disappeared took place in a heavy atmosphere. Ranger Cahill looked down at the map covered in red dots marking evidence locations. They formed no path, no escape route, no movement axis, just strange points miles apart, following no logic of desert travel. "We've searched every possible direction," one SAR member said. "If Ethan was still in this radius, we would have found him." No one argued. There was no evidence Ethan left the desert by any route. No evidence Ethan was still alive. But also no evidence Ethan was dead. Everything stopped at that bizarre void. Something that unsettled the investigators more than the Mojave heat. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department issued a provisional conclusion after reviewing all evidence. Insufficient basis to classify as homicide. Insufficient basis to determine Ethan left voluntarily. Insufficient basis to determine Ethan harmed himself. The official status recorded in the file. Voluntary disappearance. Suspicious circumstances. A halfway status, implying the truth that investigators had nothing to grasp beyond a gut feeling that this disappearance was not normal. The family strongly objected. They insisted Ethan had no reason to voluntarily abandon his life. However, the law relies only on evidence, and the Mojave had left nothing but silence. Though the official search operation was suspended after 14 days, rumors about the disappearance still spread throughout the area. Hikers began talking about strange objects, nighttime sounds, and odd marks on rocks. Among them, one statement caught investigators' attention. A man from Pahrump, Nevada named Ian Maxwell claimed that in the early morning of the 5th day after Ethan vanished, he was driving along the northern edge of the Mojave to avoid a highway repair section. Around 3 a.m., he saw a beam of light like a flashlight moving in an unusual trajectory across an open hilly area. Not like a walker's light, Maxwell said. It didn't bob up and down. It moved in a straight line, like someone walking very slowly, or not walking. Police immediately checked the area Maxwell described, but found nothing. No footprints, no items, no unusual light reflections. SAR concluded the light Maxwell saw could have been a distant vehicle's headlights, or simply a night illusion. But Maxwell insisted, "I've lived in Nevada my whole life. I know the difference between car lights and someone's light in the desert. I saw it, and I believe someone was out there." The statement was logged but could not be verified. As the third week passed, all search activities were completely scaled back. From a large-scale operation, the case officially moved to the Criminal Investigation Unit's cold files. Ethan Cole became one of hundreds who vanished along the Mojave fringe over decades. But his case differed from most previous disappearances. He left footprints that abruptly ended. He left a backpack someone had moved. He left a phone with its GPS sabotaged. He left a scene with a stranger's blood. He left evidence belonging to a man missing since 1974. Everything was abnormal, but nothing was enough to charge anyone. And so, the file labeled Ethan Cole Missing Person was officially stamped Cold Case. The strange traces were boxed up, placed in a metal container, and sent to storage. The Mojave, once again, swallowed a person and kept secrets no one could explain. But what unsettled the investigators most wasn't the case going cold. It was. No one could prove Ethan had left the Mojave, and no one could prove he was still in it. 1 full year after Ethan Cole vanished in the Mojave, his file still sat on a cold metal shelf in the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department storage room. The case folder edges had started to stain from desert sand carried in during the many times it was pulled out and put back. New investigators occasionally reviewed it as one of the most baffling, strangest, and unsolvable cases the unit had ever handled. No new leads, no new evidence, no body, no sign whatsoever that Ethan was alive or dead. The Mojave Desert, for an entire long year, kept absolute silence. But that silence did not last forever. In early July, when the Mojave summer reached its peak daytime temperatures hitting 110 degrees Fahrenheit, nights not dropping below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife began checking their camera trap system to monitor bobcat and coyote movement. They had no direct connection to Ethan's disappearance, but the cameras were placed less than 5 miles northeast of the location of his final footprints. A young technician, Amanda Ruiz, was the first to review the data. She scrolled through hundreds of videos and stopped on a clip, time-stamped at 2:58 a.m., a time when cameras rarely captured human figures. The video was only 4 seconds long, but it was enough to freeze Amanda in front of the screen. In the infrared light, a human figure walked across the frame, not running, not crouching, not avoiding the camera, just walking slowly and deliberately through the darkness. Amanda replayed the video, zoomed in, and bit her lip. The build, body proportions, shoulders, and leg structure felt eerily familiar. She called her supervisor over. One sentence from him was enough to send the report straight to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. "This person looks like Ethan Cole." When Ranger Cahill was notified, he immediately drove to the ranger station to view the footage. Though he had grown used to the unexplainable during the search for Ethan, sitting in front of the screen still sent a chill down his spine. In the infrared clip, the figure appeared from the left edge of the frame, about 25 yards from the camera. The IR light made the body glow gray-white against a pitch-black background. The silhouette from shoulders, torso width, to posture was strikingly similar to Ethan, but 3 details made everyone pause for analysis. First, the man in the video was a few centimeters taller than Ethan. Not much, just 2 to 3 centimeters, but enough for forensics to notice when compared to Ethan's recorded height. With hiking boots, height can vary, but in the video, the person was barefoot. That meant the height discrepancy was unlikely to be caused by footwear. Second, the gait was not normal. The person walked straight, but the left foot turned slightly outward, with each step a common sign of someone with a long-term injury or affected by age. Ethan had no such injury before disappearing, and he was still young, in perfect physical condition. Third, when the figure turned his head toward the camera, the infrared light reflected off the eyes, creating the glowing eye shine effect seen in animals at night. But this eye shine was unusually strong enough to completely obscure all facial features. Only 2 bright points flashed, then vanished as the person stepped into darkness. That made the face entirely unrecognizable. Regional forensics analyzed the video motion with specialized software. They measured stride length, ankle angle, hip shift delay, all parameters compared against old data on Ethan. The results left investigators in a state of unable to conclude. 80% of the body shape matched Ethan. 20% did not. Height, stride rhythm, left foot posture. Even stranger, the man in the video carried no flashlight. The camera's IR light had caused the eye reflection, but since no other light source was recorded, this person was walking in complete darkness, something most ordinary people could not do in the rugged desert terrain full of sharp rocks and thorny brush. Unless, one technician said, this person is extremely familiar with this terrain. When news of the video reached the sheriff's department, an emergency meeting was called. 1 year after the case was shelved as a cold case, they now had reason to reopen the file. But the more they discussed, the greater the contradictions became. If the person in the video really was Ethan, then why? Was he walking barefoot? Did he appear near an area that had been thoroughly searched? Did he have the gait of someone with an old injury? And most importantly, why didn't he head toward any populated area? The last question brought the longest silence to the meeting room. If Ethan had been alive for the past year, how had he survived? SAR returned to the area where the camera had recorded. They searched along the path the figure had taken, based on shadow angles and direction of movement. But once again, just like everything that happened a year earlier, footprints did not exist. No impressions at all. No drag marks. No scraps of fabric, food wrappers, or any disturbance. Just hard, dry ground blown perfectly flat by the wind. A young ranger said, maybe the person passed through before the wind picked up. But forensics countered. There are no new footprints, none. It's impossible for someone to cross without leaving anything. Again, just like Ethan's case a year ago. Footprints vanishing from the ground. When Cahill watched the video one more time, he paused at the moment the figure turned its head toward the camera. 2 bright points, the eyes flashed and then went dark. No face, no details, no identifiable features. A 4-second video, almost worthless to an outsider. But to the investigation team, it was the only thing in an entire year that broke the Mojave silence. Cahill closed the laptop, took a quiet breath, and said, whoever the person in the video is, he's moving in a specific direction. And we need to know where that direction leads. 1 year after the case was closed, the Mojave had sent them one more new question, but still no answer. Only a solitary silhouette in the night, walking with a slight limp, a few centimeters taller than Ethan, and eyes that glowed as if reflecting light, leaving the feeling that the desert had never stopped watching them. 3 days after the wildlife camera captured the mysterious figure, the SAR team expanded the search radius, an additional 12 miles in the direction motion analysts predicted the figure had gone. That area was dry, cracked land interspersed with shallow valleys, low rocky hills, and dozens of natural earth hollows carved by wind over thousands of years. Footprints did not exist, but police still believed that if the person was truly moving with purpose, wherever he was heading had to be somewhere in this zone. To cut search time, the sheriff's department deployed a specialized drone equipped with infrared camera and lightweight ground-penetrating radar, GPR light. This drone had been used in missions to locate illegal shelters or evidence caches in human trafficking cases in Arizona, and now it was brought to the Mojave for support. That midday, under dry, scorching heat, near 113 degrees Fahrenheit. On the drone's fifth pass, the operator, Sergeant Hector Rivas, detected an anomaly, a region of unusual metallic reflection beneath the sand layer. The radar showed a flat, rectangular shape about 3 meters wide, buried roughly 40 to 60 centimeters under the sandy soil. There was no reason for a metal plate this size to be here, not a recorded military remnant, not debris from old plane crashes. Rivas zoomed in on the imagery. One metal corner protruded slightly above the surface, almost completely concealed by wind-blown sand. A square shape, possibly a steel hatch. Police immediately marked the coordinates, loaded digging tools, and headed to the site for verification. When the team approached, everyone could clearly see this was not a random piece of abandoned steel. The exposed metal edge showed a rusted hinge and horizontal pull marks, as if someone had opened this hatch not long ago. The surrounding sand had signs of being disturbed, but wind had nearly leveled it long before. One ranger said, "This hatch has been opened within a few years, not decades." They immediately used small shovels, hands, and digging tools to clear around the steel edge. It took nearly an hour before they lifted the steel cover. Beneath it was a tunnel leading down, about 1 meter wide and 2 meters deep, enough for an adult to enter. The air rising from below was dry and warm, but carried no smell of decay or rot, only the scent of earth and something metallic. One ranger turned on a flashlight and was the first to descend. The chamber below had a simple but clearly used structure. Compacted earth walls, roof reinforced with steel beams. The room measured about 4 meters by 3 meters. No electricity, no heater. But in one corner were items that made everyone hold their breath. 1. Multiple military MRE cans. A group of 8 MRE cans arranged in 2 small rows. Not old types from the 70s or 80s, but models produced in 2017, according to the stamped dates on the bottoms. All intact or only lightly dented. Some had been opened, with empty packaging left inside. That meant someone had lived in this bunker at least a few years ago. 2. A hand-drawn map. The map was neatly folded inside an old nylon bag. When unfolded, it was a hand-drawn map of the Mojave in metallic ink, with many symbols unlike standard topographic markings. Swirling lines, X marks, and multiple circles around locations that did not exist on official maps. A red line ran from an area about 20 miles away, straight to the exact location of this bunker. No one understood what the map indicated. 3. A blood-stained belt. On the floor, right against the earth wall, was an old leather belt. The metal buckle was broken. The inner side was coated with dried blood turned dark brown. On-site forensics used a quick test, as expected. Human blood. However, the oxidation level showed the blood was no more than 3 years old. Meaning, it appeared after Ethan disappeared. No one dared say it aloud, but everyone thought the same thing. This blood could belong to the figure in the camera footage. While forensics continued collecting evidence, Ranger Cahill called everyone over. He stood about 1 meter from the wall, shining his light on a carved line. It was not hurried writing, not amateur knife scratches. It was deep, deliberate lettering carved with a hard tool, possibly a steel blade or military dagger. The words on the wall, "Sunset men watch you." The entire bunker fell silent for several seconds. One ranger whispered, "Sunset? What? Who are the Sunset men?" No one answered. No one knew. But everyone felt a consensus. This message was not a general warning. It had purpose. It was directed at someone, possibly the person who once lived in the bunker, or at anyone who found this place. In the 1974 cold case file of Henry Walker, the missing soldier whose dog tag was found there, was one detail reported in old records. Walker had told comrades about men who appeared at sunset. The story was dismissed at the time as hallucination due to stress from weapon testing duties in the desert. No one mentioned it in that moment, but Cahill remembered clearly, and the words on the wall now seemed more than coincidence. Forensics continued checking the wall behind the message and found a few small scrape marks as if the author intended to write more, then stopped midway. No fingerprints. No useful DNA. The bunker was unnaturally clean, only items deliberately or accidentally left behind. One more detail drew attention. The dirt floor had a single depression the exact size of an adult foot sole, but only one no-second print, as if someone had stood in that spot for a very long time but entered or left the bunker without leaving a trail. Ranger Rivas said, "If this is where the figure was heading, he should have left marks. But there's nothing. The bunker has no side exit, only this single entrance." The bunker offered no explanation for that. The Mojave had never explained anything. As the team packed evidence for lab transfer, Ranger Cahill stayed behind to look at the bunker one last time. The old steel hatch, hand-drawn map, blood-stained belt, 2017 MRE cans, and the deeply carved message, all pointed to a reality no one in the group wanted to voice. Someone had lived here. That someone was watching others. And Sunset Men, whoever they were not imaginary. The hatch was closed. The bunker was sealed. But from that moment, the Ethan Cole disappearance was no longer a simple missing person case. It had become a case showing signs of human intervention, or a group of people whose identity, origin, and purpose in the Mojave Desert remained unknown. And there was one even heavier question hanging in the air. If this bunker had been opened within the last 2 to 3 years, was the person who opened it still out there? The San Bernardino County Crime Lab received the evidence from the steel bunker just 14 hours after the bunker was opened. That was an unusually fast processing speed for a case that had once been shelved as a cold case. But everyone understood that what was found inside the bunker, especially the carved words, "Sunset Men Watch You," could not wait for standard procedures. The Ethan Cole case had now shifted to unusual disappearance with signs of criminal interference. When the soil samples, hair, dried blood samples, and materials from the bunker arrived at the forensics lab, the DNA analysis team immediately prioritized the two most critical pieces of evidence: a hair strand found near the blood-stained belt, and a cluster of fine hairs lying close to the wall, discovered during a full electrostatic sweep of the bunker. Both were processed separately. The lead technician, Dr. Marissa Markel, who had worked on DNA identification in a Death Valley victim case in 2019, opened the file, reviewed the scene notes, and began the process. 1. Centrifugation to isolate hair roots. 2. STR amplification. 3. Comparison against Ethan Cole's stored DNA profile from a year earlier. Everything took place in absolute silence. 3 hours later, preliminary results appeared. Hair sample number 1, 87% match with Ethan Cole's DNA. Markel said nothing for several seconds. An 87% match was not a perfect match like with living person DNA, but it was higher than average for degraded DNA, for example, after prolonged exposure to a dry, hot environment like the Mojave. That meant the hair very likely belonged to Ethan. The time it fell into the bunker was not too far from when he disappeared. The lead forensic stated bluntly in the quick briefing, "Ethan has been inside the bunker. There's no coincidence here." One ranger exhaled sharply through his teeth. He lived there, or was taken there? No one answered. But this conclusion changed the entire direction of the investigation. Ethan did not disappear randomly. He had been present in the steel bunker. However, the second hair sample was what truly shocked the entire lab. Hair sample number 2. Male DNA, but no match in any modern database. Forensics ran the profile through CODIS. No match. Ran it through Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico DNA banks. No match. Ran it through the federal system. No match. Just as everyone leaned toward the stranger theory, Markel tried a rarely considered approach, comparing it to historical DNA records, including gene collections extracted from old cases or digitized military files. She ran the profile against records from the 60s and 70s. One result appeared. Not a full match, but a 70% similarity, what Markel described as close to first or second degree relative level. The result read clearly: match partial, 70% similarity. Henry Walker, U.S. Army. Missing 1974, Mojave Desert. The entire briefing room sank into heavy silence. Henry Walker, the name that had just surfaced with the 1974 dog tag. The soldier missing for 50 years. The one whose cold case had long ago concluded unidentifiable, most likely deceased. His file had been shelved for decades. An assistant technician said softly, almost whispering, "Henry Walker may have been in this bunker." No one wanted to continue, but a hypothesis was clearly forming. The steel bunker had been used since the 70s, maintained by someone, and that someone had DNA 70% similar to Henry Walker. The sheriff's department immediately convened an emergency interagency meeting. Cahill spread the evidence photos across the table. The blood-stained belt, the 2017 MRE cans, the hand-drawn map, and the photo of the carved words, "Sunset Men Watch You." Detective Ramirez opened. 87% hair match to Ethan, he was inside the bunker. 70% DNA match to Henry Walker, high chance he was there, or someone related by blood. Another investigator cut in, but Henry Walker disappeared in 1974. He couldn't possibly have been there at the same time as Ethan. Forensics countered. You're looking at DNA data, not assumptions. The second hair sample belongs to someone closely genetically related to Henry Walker. It could be him, or a blood relative, but the time it fell into the bunker is no more than 10 years ago. Meaning, if this hair truly belongs to Henry Walker, he lived beyond the time he was declared missing. If it belongs to a relative, why would a relative of someone missing for 50 years appear in a bunker in the middle of the Mojave? Both possibilities were illogical, but the evidence was overwhelmingly clear. Ranger Rivas suggested further testing of the hair samples for keratin degradation levels. Estimated time of hair loss, 1 to 5 years ago. This completely ruled out any chance the hair was from the 70s and still intact. So the DNA belonged to a man who was alive within the last 5 years, closely related by blood to Henry Walker, and who had been inside the steel bunker. The head of analysis concluded, Possibility 1. Henry Walker never died. Possibility 2. Henry Walker had a relative who was here. Possibility 3. The DNA transferred via an old item touched by a modern person. All three were frightening in their own way. When the report reached higher command, the regional FBI representative ordered a full review of Henry Walker's entire file. Walker disappeared in 1974. Under mysterious circumstances, the record noted he left camp one evening, telling comrades he heard someone calling me from out in the desert. The last item ever found of his was a torn piece of shirt blown by wind near Salt Creek. The steel bunker discovered lay within a 30-mile radius of Walker's disappearance site. An FBI agent said in the meeting, "This is not coincidence. Someone has been using this bunker across decades." Forensics continued examining the blood-stained belt. It was dried blood sample number 3. When the DNA was run through the system, initial results showed DNA in the blood was not Ethan's, did not match hair sample number 2, did not match any national database. The entire briefing room went silent. 3 people, 3 different DNAs, all appearing in one steel bunker in the Mojave. One detective said half jokingly, half seriously, "That bunker feels like a place where people are taken and then vanish." No one corrected the statement. On the day the DNA results were confirmed, Ranger Cahill returned to the bunker site with the forensics team for a second sweep of the ceiling. They found an additional microscopic skin sample, most likely flaked from someone's shoulder or elbow. The sample was too small for a full profile, but enough to confirm male DNA. Not Ethan, not either of the previous 2 samples. In total, the bunker contained traces of at least 4 men within the last 5 years. Among them, 1 almost certainly Ethan, 1 closely genetically related to Henry Walker, 2 completely unidentified. The bunker was not just a shelter. It was an intersection point for multiple people who disappeared. At the end of the summary briefing, Cahill looked at the report once more and said slowly, "Ethan was there, but not alone. And if Henry Walker's DNA appears in the bunker after more than 50 years, we're facing something bigger than one disappearance." No one argued. No one had an explanation. DNA, the coldest, most precise evidence, had just opened a massive question. Henry Walker, the soldier missing since 1974, was he truly dead? Or had he returned to the Mojave, just like Ethan? News of the 70% DNA match to Henry Walker, the soldier missing since 1974, reached the FBI Los Angeles Cold Case Office just 2 hours after lab confirmation. Soon after, a historic decision was made: fully reopen Walker's file, which had lain dormant in military storage for half a century. Walker's file arrived in San Bernardino in 3 dusty old cartons, sealed with faded military stamps. When investigators opened the boxes, they found stacks of documents once marked insufficient evidence, case closed 1979. But this time, they had what 1974 did not: modern DNA, fresh traces, and a strikingly similar disappearance in Ethan Cole. The old handwritten notes in Walker's file immediately drew attention. Good physical condition. No history of hallucinations. Disappeared in desert strip near Rock Spring Loop. Final night, reported to comrades. Someone is calling me from out there. That last detail was identical to what the hiking couple heard Ethan say 1 year before he vanished. Ranger Cahill read it and let out only a very quiet breath. No one saw this as coincidence anymore. Upon deeper review, the investigation team discovered a strange note in a 1975 document, not in the main file, but clipped into a military police lieutenant's memo book. Within 36 months, the Rock Spring, Kelso, SEMA area recorded 4 unexplained disappearances: 1 military, Walker, 3 civilians. Below it was a list of 3 names never widely released. 1. Samuel Thurman, 32 years old, missing August 1974. 2. James Holloway, 27 years old, missing October 1974. 3. Brianne Kessler, 19 years old, missing December 1974. All 3 were hikers. All 3 were alone. All 3 vanished within 5 months, in the same area where Ethan Cole disappeared in 2023. And most importantly, all 3 cases were closed after just 18 months, with no significant evidence. The major in charge of military police for the area hastily wrote in the conclusion, "No signs of criminal activity. Likely death due to weather or getting lost." But when cross-referencing the 1974 SAR records, the truth was completely different. All 3 disappeared in good weather conditions. No bodies or belongings were ever found. No turnaround footprints, just like Ethan's case. No distress radio calls. No evidence they were underprepared or short on water. The entire natural death conclusion was based on no actual evidence. Cahill flipped through an old map marking the 1974 search coordinates. The red dots indicating where the 3 hikers vanished, when connected to the newly discovered steel bunker, formed an almost perfect triangle surrounding the Rock Spring Loop area. A newer investigator looked at the map and said, "The bunker sits right in the center of the triangle." No one spoke. But everyone understood the implication. That area was not chosen randomly. Someone had been operating there, and the disappearance pattern had existed for 50 years. The FBI continued reviewing Walker's file. A 1976 report stated that the search team had located a partially sand-buried metal structure more than 10 miles south of Walker's disappearance site. But when they returned for a second check, a major sandstorm that year had erased the location, preventing the team from relocating it. The accompanying note from the lead sergeant read, "That metal structure could be an old World War II bunker." And right below it, someone had handwritten in blue ink, "Or not." This report had never been included in the main file. It was classified as unspecified note, meaning not reliable enough for storage. But now, looking at the steel bunker the team had just found, everything changed. Suddenly, the note dismissed as unimportant in 1976 became one of the most valuable leads. In the 5 p.m. meeting that same day, the FBI representative laid out the full timeline. 1974. Henry Walker disappears. Within the next 5 months, 3 hikers vanish without a trace. 1976. Isolated report of a sand-buried metal structure. 2023. Ethan Cole disappears with identical signs to Walker. 2025. DNA in the steel bunker. Ethan and someone genetically linked to Henry Walker. The entire briefing room was politely asked to silence phones. No one was to speak to the press. One investigator lightly tapped his fingers on the table. "What does this mean?" In 1974, Was there a group operating in the Mojave, or a lone individual? And if Henry Walker is involved, was he a victim or the perpetrator? Another shook his head. We can't know. But if Walker's DNA appears in the bunker within the last 5 years, he didn't die in 1974. No one in the room wanted to believe it, but there was no more reasonable explanation. Later, the team checked the files on Holloway and Thurman. Both shared one strange detail. In the week before disappearing, they had each told family members they saw strange lights at sunset in the desert. Cahill looked again at the words carved in the bunker. Sunset men watch you. And a chilling connection began to form. The 1974 file wasn't reopened just because Walker's DNA appeared in the bunker. It was reopened because every detail, every sign matched Ethan Cole's disappearance. And if this was a pattern stretching across 50 years, then the Mojave wasn't just a place where people got lost and died. It was a place where people vanished. Not randomly, not by accident, and not just once. 2 years after Ethan Cole vanished in the Mojave Desert, his file had passed through 3 generations of detectives, dozens of satellite sweeps, 2 reanalyses of DNA from the steel bunker, and a reopening of the 1974 case that led to the entire Rock Spring Loop area being classified as high-risk desert. But everything still remained scattered facts, with no answers. Until the morning of June 14, at 5:42 a.m., an employee at a small gas station in the town of Baker, right on the edge of the Mojave, called police to report seeing a man who looked like he had just stepped out of a long nightmare. The man was barefoot, wearing clothes almost completely faded from sun and wind, with long and tangled hair, hands trembling violently. At first, the employee thought he was homeless or suffering from heat stroke, but when the man lifted his head and asked in a parched voice, "Where is this?" the employee immediately recognized the face. Though gaunt and aged, it was Ethan Cole. Police dispatch sent units right away. The sight when Ranger Cahill arrived at the gas station made him freeze for several seconds. Ethan sat with his legs drawn up close to an old pump pillar, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes constantly darting toward the southern horizon where the Mojave sand dunes rolled like endless waves. He carried no backpack, no belongings, no water bottle, no sign of any transportation. Only bare feet covered in dried reddish-brown mud and a level of panic Cahill had never seen. When he saw Cahill, Ethan squinted as if trying to remember. It took several seconds before he spoke, so quietly it was almost inaudible. I shouldn't be here." Cahill approached gently. "Ethan, are you okay? Do you remember what happened?" Ethan's eyes twitched slightly. He looked straight at Cahill for the first time. "He is still out there." The words made everyone around stop cold. Cahill asked, Who are you talking about?" Ethan shook his head repeatedly. Don't let him see me." A police officer led Ethan inside the gas station for an initial check. He was mildly dehydrated, heart rate elevated but not critical, no obvious injuries. But his mental state was different. Ethan kept glancing through the glass, breathing rapidly whenever someone walked past, and especially reacting strongly when anyone touched his shoulder. While medical staff examined him, Detective Ramirez requested the gas station security footage. When they rewound to 5:35 a.m., they saw something no one could explain. Ethan did not walk in from the main road, not from the residential side, not from any trail. He appeared at the right edge of the screen, from an area that was only sand dunes, a zone with absolutely no path or access route. To reach the station from that direction, he would have had to cross extremely dangerous terrain and left no footprints visible on camera. Ramirez zoomed in. Ethan stepped down from a sand slope higher than 12 feet, gait unsteady but without looking around. He walked straight to the gas station as if he knew its exact location, even though from that angle the camera only captured 30% of the station front, the rest obscured by a truck parked overnight. One employee whispered, "He didn't look around for directions. He walked like someone who had lived here his whole life." But Ethan had never been to Baker before disappearing. According to investigation records, he only hiked near the Mojave and had never stopped at this gas station. Ethan was loaded into an ambulance while conscious but panicked. When the doctor asked how long he had gone without water, Ethan only replied, "Don't remember. But the sun there. It went down and came up, and down again. But not right." The fragmented answer left everyone puzzled. When Cahill asked directly, "Ethan, where have you been these 2 years?" he answered immediately, without hesitation, "I'm not allowed to say." "He'll hear." "Who is he?" Cahill asked again. Ethan fell silent. His lips trembled violently. Then he whispered, "Not one person. Not just one. They watch when the sun sets." When police examined Ethan's feet, they found fine silvery gray soil under his toenails, the exact type collected from the steel bunker. Ethan was taken to a medical isolation room for monitoring. But as the ambulance prepared to leave the gas station, he suddenly grabbed Cahill's hand tightly, voice choking. "I tried to run, but he still found the way. Don't go in there anymore. Don't go back to the place with the steel hatch. Don't." He stopped, eyes wide, staring toward the distant desert beyond the gas station. "He's coming to find me." When the ambulance door closed, Cahill stood motionless. 2 years of searching, countless strange traces, inexplicable DNA, the disappearances from 1974, the steel bunker, and now Ethan had returned barefoot, with no belongings, delivering haunting warnings. Ethan Cole's file was no longer a missing person case. From the moment he appeared at the gas station, trembling as he said, "He's still out there," the case officially entered an entirely different phase. Ethan Cole was taken directly to the San Bernardino County Medical Center, while conscious but extremely alert. He refused to lie down, constantly scanning the room, his eyes contracting every time the door opened or footsteps sounded in the hallway. Medical staff took nearly 20 minutes to persuade him before he allowed the doctor to perform an initial examination. From the moment Ethan removed his hospital gown and revealed his emaciated body, everything immediately became far more serious than anyone had anticipated. Ethan's body told the first story. He had suffered prolonged malnutrition. His BMI had dropped nearly 20% compared to his pre-disappearance health records. Muscle mass had severely decreased in his shoulders, abdomen, and legs. Ethan had not simply lost weight from long-distance hiking. His body showed signs of protein deficiency, fat deficiency, and chronic dehydration, conditions typical of someone held captive or living in an environment with controlled food access. The doctor noted, "The body has not been nourished properly. Signs of prolonged duration, possibly more than 1 year." This matched the state in which he appeared at the gas station, weak but not collapsed, meaning Ethan had been fed at the bare minimum level needed to survive. Not lost. Not surviving on his own. It was a keep-alive regimen. Ethan's skin displayed a completely abnormal sunburn pattern. The dermatologist examining Ethan had to pause 3 times because he could not believe what he was seeing. Upper arms. Severe sunburn. Skin darkened and cracked. Lower arms. Relatively light and unburned. Neck. Distinct sunburn. Shoulders and back. Almost no burn, only a few patchy spots. Face. Cheekbones heavily tanned, but forehead less affected. The doctor concluded, sunburn in a narrow slit pattern, as if light came through a narrow opening or small vent. A forensic staff member asked the question no one wanted to voice, meaning Ethan lived in a space with limited light, like a room or a small bunker. When light patterns were simulated using the data, Ethan's sunburn pattern closely matched light entering through a slit 3 to 4 centimeters wide and 30 to 40 centimeters long, similar to the ventilation openings in the steel bunker. Everyone understood what that implied. Ethan's fingernails showed breaks and tears not from climbing. When the doctor examined his hands, they found the thumbnails and index fingernails on both hands irregularly broken, with cracks running upward from the middle of the nail. This type of nail breakage occurs from scratching against hard surfaces, concrete, steel, or rock. Fine, silvery gray dust remained under the nail tips. Forensics ran a quick test. The dust matched exactly the metallic dust found on Ethan's car door handle 2 years earlier. One technician said quietly, "He tried to scratch, claw, to get out of something." If Ethan had been confined in the bunker, It was possible he had scratched at the walls or door trying to escape. This aligned perfectly with the abnormal light pattern on his skin. Ethan's wrists bore faded bruises shaped like marks from being held or restrained. When the doctor lifted his left hand to check his pulse, they discovered an old bruise, about 5 centimeters long, purplish-brown, a sign of bruising more than 2 weeks old, but not fully faded. The bruise ran halfway around the wrist in a C-shape, not the kind from a fall. This was the type of bruise caused by strong finger pressure or binding. One forensic investigator asked Ethan very gently, "Ethan, did anyone hold your wrists? Did anyone tie you?" Ethan flinched violently, yanking his hand back as if burned. He answered in a broken voice, "They didn't tie, if I didn't try to run. If I was good, they didn't tie." No one in the room said another word, but that statement was enough to confirm Ethan had been held against his will. Not an accident. Not lost. Not free to roam. He had been kept. Ethan had an avoidance reflex to the sound of metal clanging together. While a nurse was getting tools to take his temperature, a steel tray fell to the floor with a loud clang. Ethan bolted off the bed, hands covering his head, dropping to his knees on the hospital floor. His heart rate spiked to 152 beats per minute in just 4 seconds. The doctor ordered Ethan transferred to psychiatric care for PTSD evaluation. Psychiatric notes. Avoidance reflex to metal sounds sign of being held in a space with repeated metallic noises, steel door banging, chains, metal grating. Sensitivity to bright light, prolonged time in darkness or dim lighting. Avoidance of looking at doors. Fear of someone appearing suddenly, all consistent with a long-term confinement victim. Ethan kept mentioning him, but couldn't describe him. In the first psychiatric evaluation, the specialist asked, "Ethan, who kept you?" He shook his head, eyes wide, voice choking. "Not one person, not alone. He didn't let me see his face." What did that person want? Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he said something that stunned the entire investigation team. "He didn't want me to die. He wanted me to stay there." The specialist asked, "Stay where?" Ethan buried his face in the table and whispered, "Underground. Where light doesn't reach, where the sun doesn't touch, where I heard footsteps when sunset came. He's still out there." The medical conclusions sent to the investigation team. Though the exact details of what happened during Ethan's 2 missing years remain unknown, the medical file presents undeniable points. Prolonged malnutrition held captive, not free to survive independently. Narrow pattern sunburn, not living outdoors, but in an enclosed space. Broken fingernails with metallic dust scratching in a bunker. Confined space. Wrist bruises restrained or held. PTSD reflexes previously confined, previously threatened. All leading to one single conclusion. Ethan Cole was held against his will in a narrow, dark environment with limited light for an extended period. There was no longer any doubt. This was a criminal case. Not a typical disappearance. Not an accident. One person, or multiple people, had continuously held Ethan for 2 years, and the steel bunker in the Mojave might only be part of that place. While Ethan was kept for medical and psychiatric monitoring, the investigation team continued examining his clothing. The torn, sun-bleached garments faded to the point where the original colors were hard to recognize. When a forensic investigator turned out the left chest pocket, they felt a small item folded many times, a sweat-soaked piece of paper, severely creased, but still intact. When unfolded, everyone stood silent. It was a hand-drawn map, smaller than the map found in the steel bunker, but the drawing style silver metallic pen strokes, non-standard terrain markings, swirling symbols was an exact match. It was not a tourist map, not a SAR map, not an NPS-issued topographic map. It was a self-made map, used to categorize dangerous and safe zones identical to the strange divisions on the bunker map. Investigator Ramirez placed the bunker map next to the one from Ethan's pocket. The overlaps were chillingly perfect. Same safe markings near narrow rock crevices. Same swirling symbols at 3 quicksand areas near Kelso. Same red X line extending northeast across the Mojave. Same repeating black triangle symbols. But the biggest coincidence was at the edge of the map, where there was a symbol no one recognized at first. A rectangular symbol with shading and double diagonal lines. When forensics zoomed in on the image, Ramirez let out a sharp breath. I've seen this in old military documents. A military expert was called in to review it. He looked at the map for just a few seconds and said immediately, "This symbol was discontinued by the U.S. military in 1978. It used to mark unofficial temporary bases or assembly points for testing units." The entire room fell silent. A military symbol discontinued since 1978 appearing on the map found in the steel bunker, and now again in the pocket of Ethan, who returned after 2 years missing. No one on the team could explain this logically. Ramirez asked directly, "Is it possible someone rediscovered the old symbol and copied it?" The expert shook his head. "Impossible. This symbol only appeared in internal documents from the 60s and 70s. It was never public. Civilians never saw it." A young investigator swallowed hard. "So who drew this map? And why give it to Ethan?" No one answered. In the next interrogation session, Cahill brought the map to Ethan. The moment he saw the map, Ethan recoiled as if threatened. He shook his head, backing against the hospital wall, eyes wide. Don't bring it near me." Cahill softened his voice. "Ethan, this map was in your pocket. We need to know what it is." Ethan trembled in spasms. "Finally," he said quietly, I didn't know it was there. It's not mine." "You've never seen it before?" Ethan shook his head hard. "No. I didn't draw it. No one gave it to me. I don't know who put it in my pocket. But this map matches the one in the bunker. Did you ever see the map in the bunker?" Ethan covered his ears. "Don't talk about the bunker. Don't make me remember." Cahill tried a gentler approach. "Ethan, the map marks safe zones and danger zones. Do you know why?" Ethan looked up, eyes red-rimmed, but his voice deadly serious. "There are no safe places. They wrote safe to make me go there. But all of them are traps." Cahill repeated. "They?" Ethan was silent for a long time, then whispered, "Not one person. Not one. They know the paths. They know when the wind changes. They know when the sun sets. They know everything." "Ethan, who knows?" Ethan looked down at the map and trembled violently. "They drew these things. They marked where they stand, where they watch. Danger zones mean places where I could see them if they didn't hide in time." The entire room froze. If Ethan was telling the truth, the map was not a travel map. It was an operations map. "Ethan," Cahill said slowly, "this symbol, this old military symbol from 1978, what does it mean to you?" Ethan frowned, trying to remember. It took more than 20 seconds before he spoke. "I saw that shape somewhere in the dark. On the wall? On equipment? I don't remember. But it's old. It's very old. Like something someone tried to cover up." Forensics continued analyzing the metallic ink on the map. Results. The pen used was military technical drawing pen. Metal nib. Discontinued since 1982. The silver ink had the exact alloy composition as the map from the bunker. Pen pressure showed the drawer had strong wrists, slow writing speed, firm strokes consistent with trained individuals. All pointed to 3 possibilities. 1. The person who was in the bunker drew it. 2. An individual with old military connections drew it. 3. Someone from the 1974 disappearances continued to appear later. None of the possibilities felt safe. In the end-of-day meeting, Ramirez said the words that weighed heavily on the room. "The map doesn't just show where Ethan went. It shows where others stood. The watchers. The ones controlling Ethan's path. The ones logging their activity zones. And the scarier part, someone placed this map in Ethan's pocket right before he appeared at the gas station." The question no one wanted to ask, but everyone was thinking, what message was that person trying to send? The information about the map in Ethan's pocket prompted investigators to expand witness searches around Baker, Nipton, and Mojave access points. They hoped at least someone had seen Ethan in recent days, but no one expected the first person to reach out voluntarily would be Brian Keats, a man who had lived off-grid near the desert edge for over 20 years. Keats was 62 years old, with a long beard, slightly gaunt build, wearing an old jacket torn at the shoulders. He lived in a battered RV, permanently parked on a lot just 1 mile off Interstate 15. Keats had a reputation as someone who sees things no one else sees, but he had also helped SAR in 2019 by pinpointing 2 lost tourists, so police took anything he said seriously. That evening, when Detective Ramirez and Ranger Cahill arrived at Keats's RV, he was already waiting outside, eyes narrowed as if the patrol car headlights were too bright for him. "I knew you'd come," Keats said, voice hoarse but not drunk. "I saw him. Ethan. But not just him." Cahill looked straight at him. "Mr. Keats, you're saying you saw Ethan before he appeared at the gas station?" Keats nodded. 3 nights ago. At sunset. I saw him coming from the direction of the northern rock hollows. But he wasn't walking alone. The air inside the RV seemed to freeze. "Who did you see with him?" Ramirez asked. Keats took a deep breath, as if weighing every word. "An older man. Much older than him. But he moved strangely fast. Not like an old man. Not like a young one. Like something in between." Cahill felt a chill down his spine. "How clearly did you see him?" Keats pointed toward the RV window. "I was about 200 yards away. Not close, but close enough to see the gate." The older man hunched a bit when standing still, but when moving he straightened up and took very long strides. Ramirez turned on the recorder. "Can you describe him in more detail?" Keats frowned in the dim light, as if pulling the image back. He breathed heavily, like he'd been injured in the chest once. Breathing labored, quick, but when sunset hit the ridge, he moved extremely fast. So fast I thought it was a trick of the light. Cahill glanced at Ramirez. "You said sunset?" "Yes. They only appeared then, when there was just enough light to see, but not enough to make out faces clearly." Another match the bunker had the carved words, "Sunset men watch you." And now a witness had seen an older man appearing only at sunset. Ramirez opened the laptop he brought, pulling up an old military file photo of Henry Walker from 1974. A 28-year-old man, angular face, deep-set eyes, short hair, straight posture. "Mr. Keats?" Ramirez turned the screen. "Does the man you saw resemble this person?" Keats narrowed his eyes immediately. He stared so long Cahill thought he saw nothing familiar. But then Keats inhaled sharply, as if a buried memory surfaced. "Yes. Very similar town." "How similar, Mr. Keats?" "Not 100%. But the gait, the way he held his shoulders, and especially those deep eyes, I wouldn't mistake them." "But this is a photo from 50 years ago," Ramirez said. "Henry Walker disappeared in 1974. Keats showed no surprise. "I don't care what year he disappeared. I only know the man I saw had the eyes of someone who stared at the desert too long. The eyes of someone who's no longer ordinary." Both investigators fell silent. Keats continued. He looked around like he was checking the path. Didn't speak. Didn't look back at Ethan. Just signaled with his hand. And Ethan followed as if he had no other choice. Cahill felt the hair on his neck rise. "You're saying Ethan was forced to follow?" "No." Keats shook his head. "Not dragged. Not pushed. But he walked like someone who'd been taught to do it." "Taught?" "Yes. Like he was used to it. Like he'd followed that older man many times before." Ramirez noted, "Statement, consistent with long-term captivity victim pattern." Keats stood, retrieving a worn old notebook from inside the RV, pages yellowed. He opened to a middle page, pointing to an entry from 2016. "This wasn't the first time. I saw someone like him 9 years ago. Same fast movement at sunset. Same hunch when standing, straight when walking. But back then, I thought I was just tired and seeing things." Cahill read the line. "Sunset Walker. Moves fast. Doesn't look back." Ramirez asked, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Keats gave a faint smile. "You think anyone would believe me? A guy living on the fringe? Like me?" But when Ethan showed up at the gas station, and people said he'd been held in some bunker. I knew I had to speak. You believe that older man is still alive? Cahill asked. Keats answered without hesitation. I'm certain, and I believe he's the one you're looking for. Henry Walker, or whatever name he uses now. Ramirez leaned back. If you're right, Walker isn't just alive. He's been living, hidden in the Mojave, for over 50 years. Keats looked toward the darkness outside the RV window. The desert keeps the people it wants to keep. And there are those who know how to live in it longer than humans are supposed to. Cahill tried one final confirmation. Mr. Keats, can you say with 80% certainty that the man you saw resembles Henry Walker? Keats looked him straight in the eye. I'm 100% certain the man I saw wasn't normal. And if that photo is Walker from 1974, then the man I saw that night was him. As they left the RV, Cahill stood outside the vehicle for a long time, staring in the direction Keats had pointed. Henry Walker disappeared in 1974. DNA, genetically linked to him, appeared in the bunker. A military symbol discontinued in 1978 showed up on the maps. A credible witness said he saw him moving very fast at sunset. The question now was no longer, did Henry Walker die in 1974? The question was, if Walker is still alive, who was Ethan living with in the Mojave darkness for the past 2 years? Brian Keats's statement shifted the entire investigation toward a possibility no one had dared put on the table before. Henry Walker, or someone connected to him, may have been living inside the Mojave for decades. The steel bunker previously found was just the tip of the iceberg. If Walker or a small group had been operating in the desert since the 1970s, they couldn't have relied on one isolated bunker. The next thing to find was, where did they live? How did they move? And how had no one discovered them? The FBI sent the hand-drawn maps, both the one from the bunker and the one in Ethan's pocket, to the Army Training Command at Fort Irwin, where a unit specialized in analyzing underground infrastructure from former test ranges. A team of experts, led by retired military engineer Colonel Marcus Rowley, was brought in. Rowley studied the maps for less than 10 minutes before spotting the anomaly. These swirling symbols, he pointed at the map, aren't civilian markings. These are airflow tunnel symbols used for test sites, especially underground facilities from the late Cold War era. The entire briefing room paused. You're saying these symbols indicate someone with military knowledge? Ramirez asked. Rowley nodded. This symbol, combined with the discontinued 1978 base marker, shows the map depicts a network of old facilities, not one small bunker, a system. And it's in the Mojave. Ranger Cahill reacted sharply. We were never informed the Mojave had extensive underground facilities. Rowley shrugged. Most records were classified from the 70s. But I've heard rumors. There was an experimental tunnel system jointly run by DARPA and the Army near what's now the Rock Spring Loop area. The project was shut down in 1978, and all entrances were buried to prevent civilians from accidentally entering. How long? Cahill asked. Rowley answered slowly. If the map symbols are accurate, the tunnel network is nearly 3 miles long. Some sections may have collapsed, but the core could still exist. The next day, the investigation team used GPR, ground-penetrating radar, drones to scan the area between Rock Spring Loop, Kelso, SEMA. Initial data was noisy due to Mojave geology, but when a supercomputer processed the signal layers, an underground map emerged. A main tunnel 2.7 miles long, 4 branching side tunnels, multiple small round chambers, possibly test rooms. One deeper tunnel, purpose unclear. The entire team stared at the screen as if frozen. Cahill said quietly, the steel bunker was just a secondary entrance. Ramirez whispered, where Ethan was held wasn't one room. He may have moved through this entire network. They immediately organized a team to enter the tunnels via the previously discovered steel hatch. The entry team consisted of 2 rangers, 2 forensic technicians, and Colonel Rowley. The descent was narrow but not deep. Once at the bottom, they began expanding the area around it. Just 10 minutes of digging sand revealed the first thing. A second steel door, concealed by dirt and rock, 14 feet east of the original hatch. Thick, Old metal with a faded army logo from 1973. After prying it open, a long tunnel stretched out. Inside was pitch black, but the air was cooler. Flashlight beams revealed rough earth and concrete walls, exposing a series of traces, scratch marks on the walls. Old fingernail scratches, matching the breaks on Ethan's nails. Rusted steel rails, once supporting wiring. Very old footprints, shallow under dust. Some wall sections crumbling. But what made everyone stop was a series of shoe prints on the dirt floor. 4 distinct types. Forensics measured each. 1. Print number 1. Size 10.5 matching Ethan's shoe size, but wear pattern on the outer edge, while Ethan's showed inner edge wear, not Ethan's. 2. Print number 2. Size 9 old-style military boots from the 70s, possibly linked to Henry Walker or someone from that era. 3. Print number 3. Barefoot prints, small, shallow, possibly another victim. Requires further testing, but most important. 4. Print number 4. Very large shoe prints, size 14 or 15, larger than any common civilian shoe. Wide, deep, and an unusual gait. Stride length, 20 to 30% longer than average. Far heavier pressure than the others. Rowley stared for a long time and said, "This isn't the print of someone dehydrated or lost. This is the print of someone strong, or someone completely accustomed to moving in tunnels." The lead forensic concluded, "This print appears most frequently. This person walked the most," meaning someone has lived here for years. The group paused at that information. Not just Ethan, not just Henry Walker. There was someone else, possibly someone who had lived in these tunnels for decades. Cahill asked Rowley, "Could this be a facility operator from the 70s? Rowley shook his head. No. An operator would hardly still be alive today. Unless they don't live like we do. The statement made a young ranger shiver. They advanced over 300 yards deeper into the tunnel. The floor showed parallel drag marks like hauling or moving heavy items. At one bend, they found an expanded area with wall remnants of metal materials. Some ceiling wear marks looked like repeated scratching with a sharp object. Forensics collected more hair samples stuck in wall cracks, long silvery gray, unlike Ethan's. Heading back along the main path, the tech team discovered a carved drawing on the wall very similar to the map symbols. And beneath it, letters in no particular order. Zone 3 equals watch zone. Ramirez swallowed hard. Someone knows every section of these tunnels. Someone marked where they stand guard. As the team neared the exit, Rowley suddenly stopped and shone his light on a dark streak on the floor. The streak was over 40 centimeters long, once soaked into the dirt, now dried black. Quick test. Positive for hemoglobin. Human blood. One ranger looked at the blood mark. Then deeper into the dark tunnel, someone was injured here. Or worse. The lead forensic stood up straight, voice firm. There's no doubt anymore. This tunnel system wasn't abandoned in 1978 like the records say. It has been used continuously. The boot prints, old shoe prints, barefoot prints, and the large shoe prints all prove it. Cahill asked, "How many people are we looking for?" Forensics answered immediately. At minimum 3. 1 wearing military boots. 1 wearing unusually large shoes. 1 barefoot. And Ethan was here. He paused a few seconds, then added, "Possibly more." When they emerged outside, the Mojave sunlight had turned golden. Wind blew from the east, carrying the scent of scorching hot sand. People always said the Mojave was vast enough to swallow anyone. But now, the investigation team knew a different truth. The desert didn't just swallow people, it held them. And someone had lived in the darkness for years, possibly decades. The shoe prints, the old military symbols, the blood marks, and the nearly 3-mile tunnel network only proved one thing. Ethan wasn't the only one affected. And Henry Walker wasn't the last one here. There was someone else. At least one. That person was still living in the underground Mojave tunnel system. The discovery of the nearly 3-mile tunnel system, the unusual shoe prints, and the old blood marks made the sheriff's department realize there was no time left to hesitate. If Ethan had been inside that tunnel network and if an older man, possibly Henry Walker, was still moving through it, then the only answers lay in Ethan Cole's head. But since hospitalization, Ethan had only spoken fragmented sentences about him. Sunset light, and don't let him hear. He avoided every question related to the place of confinement. So, the investigation team prepared a formal interview with a psychologist, a doctor monitoring, Ranger Cahill, and Detective Ramirez. This was called the final Q&A, before Ethan was transferred to intensive treatment. They didn't expect Ethan to tell everything, but they needed him to confirm just one thing. Who was the man in the bunker? The interview room was adjusted to dim lighting to avoid overstimulation. When Ethan was brought in, he sat with knees drawn up on the chair, hands on his thighs as if trying to keep himself from shaking. He didn't look like a victim who had just escaped the desert. He looked like someone who had lived in darkness too long. Cahill sat down first, voice gentle. Ethan, we just found a tunnel system. We need your help. Just tell the truth you remember. Ethan remained silent. Ramirez placed a water bottle on the table and said, "No one will take you back there. You're safe now." Still silent. The psychologist tried. "Ethan, you're not responsible. We'll protect you from anyone." Ethan shook his head very slowly, as if those words only made him more afraid. Cahill understood that direct questions would yield nothing. So he opened a large envelope and pulled out 3 photos. Photo 1. The unusually large shoe prints in the tunnel. Photo 2. The hand-drawn map with old military symbols. Photo 3. The portrait of Henry Walker from 1974. Cahill placed the first 2 photos on the table and waited for a reaction. No reaction. Ethan just stared into empty space in front of him, as if struggling to exist even in this interview room. Then Cahill placed the 3rd photo, the portrait of Henry Walker, down. The moment happened very quickly. Ethan looked at the photo for less than a second. His eyes widened, jerking as if electrocuted. Then he trembled violently from shoulders to feet, breathing in gasps. He raised a hand to cover half his face, but his eyes stayed glued to Walker's photo as if unable to look away. Just seconds later, he began to cry. Not loud crying, but desperate, choked sobs, like someone who had held fear in their body too long and finally had no strength left to contain it. The psychologist stepped closer. "Ethan, do you recognize the person in the photo?" Ethan didn't answer. He only raised a trembling hand and pointed at the picture. His finger didn't touch the paper, hovering a few inches away as if touching it would cause something terrible. Cahill asked again, slow and very gentle. "Ethan, this man, is he the one you saw in the bunker?" No one dared breathe heavily. The room became so quiet the air conditioner hum was audible. Ethan took one deep breath, as if gathering the last bit of courage left. Then he spoke, just one sentence, but enough to send chills down the entire investigation team's spines. "He didn't want me to leave." A second later, Ethan yanked his hand back as if burned. He clutched his head and shook hard. No, I'm not supposed to say. He'll hear. He'll know I said." The psychologist immediately signaled to pause the interview. But before medical staff took him out of the room, Ramirez tried one more question. "Ethan, did you see him go outside? Did you see him enter the tunnels?" Ethan looked up, eyes red and full of tears. He whispered softly enough that the whole room leaned in to hear. "He doesn't need to go outside. He's down there. I wasn't allowed to run. I wasn't allowed." He choked, his voice vanishing completely. When the psychologist touched his shoulder to calm him, Ethan flinched so hard he nearly fell off the chair. "Don't make me look at that photo anymore, please." The interview had to end immediately. Ethan was taken back to the special care room, where lighting was dim and even the softest sounds were controlled to avoid further panic. When the door closed, only 3 people remained standing with Walker's photo on the table. Cahill, Ramirez, and the FBI representative. Cahill said directly, without beating around the bush. Ethan recognized him. Maybe not from looking directly, but he remembers him. Remembers fearing him. And based on Ethan's reaction, I believe he's still alive, or at least was with him in the bunker. Ramirez nodded. Ethan only said one sentence, but it was clear enough. He didn't want me to leave. That means he knew where Ethan was. He wanted Ethan to stay, and Ethan only escaped, somehow. The FBI concluded coldly. Based on Ethan's reaction, physical response, and the traces in the bunker, we're not just pursuing Walker. We're pursuing the person controlling that tunnel system. Someone who may have lived under the Mojave for a very long time. Cahill looked at Walker's photo one more time. The young face of the man missing since 1974, with deep and serious eyes, suddenly no longer just a photo in an old file. It was the face Ethan still saw in his sleep, the face of the person he believed was still under the Mojave. And the person Ethan choked out. He didn't want me to leave. The entire investigation team gathered at the San Bernardino County office early the next morning. The atmosphere was so thick everyone felt it before stepping into the briefing room. The case had reached the point where authorities could no longer delay. Ethan had confirmed, though only with one trembling sentence, that he recognized the man in Henry Walker's photo. The bunker showed evidence of multiple people across decades. Footprint analysis revealed at least one other individual active in the nearly 3-mile tunnel network, and the DNA was no longer at possible levels. It had revealed a truth almost impossible to believe. The briefing table was piled with evidence. Hand-drawn maps, photos of the giant shoe prints, hair recovered from the bunker, tunnel photos, the blood-stained belt, and the 1974 Walker file. Colonel Rowley stood at the head of the table, looking tired but with eyes bright like someone who had just assembled a picture everyone feared to see. Before the meeting began, forensics presented the final DNA report. Results. Hair sample number 2 found in the bunker matched 95.3% with Henry Walker's 1974 DNA. No one in the room spoke for several seconds. One investigator whispered, 95%. That can't be a distant relative. That's the same person, or someone still alive with nearly unchanged DNA. Forensics explained, this isn't next-generation compatibility level. This is individual-level compatibility. But the DNA shows aging from time and dry environment. When we compensated for degraded regions, the profile matched Henry Walker at 95%. Ramirez leaned back in his chair, feeling like the room had shrunk. Meaning? Henry Walker didn't die in 1974. Cahill continued, voice low and firm. Not only did he not die, he lived in the bunker, lived in the Mojave, lived in darkness for 50 years. Forensics added more. Comparison of bunker footprints with 70s-era military boot patterns showed the gait of print number 2, very similar to Walker's movement pattern from his military days. They analyzed foot rotation angle, stride length, estimated weight, all matched. As for the unusually large shoe prints, size 14 to 15, they belonged to neither Ethan nor Keats, and not to anyone recorded in the area. But forensics determined those prints weren't from multiple people, but one individual, walking back and forth hundreds of times through the tunnel network. The report stated clearly, this person moved with the stability of someone long accustomed to underground environments. Foot pressure stronger than a normal 70 to 80-year-old. Signs of slightly hunched gait from years in low-ceiling spaces. One ranger blurted out, like, that person belongs to the tunnels. No one argued. Combined with Keats's statement, the man who saw an older man, breathing hard but moving very fast at sunset, the picture grew clearer. There was a man who appeared at sunset hours. There was someone intimately familiar with the tunnel terrain. There was someone who only emerged when light shifted to dusk, when sunlight no longer reached deep into rock crevices. And all of it matched the description of Henry Walker from the 1974 file. Colonel Rowley stood up and opened the GPR-generated tunnel map. This is a tunnel network large enough for 3 to 5 people to live in, but the traces show only one person has used it continuously for the past 40 years. He pointed to the main tunnel section where the large shoe prints appeared densely. This is the living area. This is where that person slept, ate, stored MREs. This is the watch zone marked on the map from Ethan's pocket. And here, he pointed to the deepest area, almost beyond radar reach. We don't know what's down there. Ramirez asked the question everyone had avoided for days. So what do we conclude? Walker is the perpetrator? Rowley looked at each person, then said, it's not just a possibility. All evidence points in one direction. Henry Walker abducted Ethan Cole. Henry Walker lived in the bunker. Henry Walker is the one who appears at sunset. And Henry Walker is still alive. The FBI compiled all evidence on the board. 1. DNA, 95.3% match to Henry Walker. Hair sample, in bunker. 2. Footprint. Matches Walker's gait from military service. 3. Timeline. Walker disappeared in the same area Ethan did. 4. Keats' testimony. Description of older man resembling 1974 Walker photo. 5. Tunnel network. Military symbols discontinued in 1978, only known to people from that era. 6. Ethan, strong reaction to Walker's photo. 7. Ethan's statement. He didn't want me to leave. 8. Map. Handwriting matches bunker map. Finally, the FBI wrote a large conclusion on the whiteboard. Suspect, Henry Walker. Status. Alive. Highly dangerous. Age E. Est. 70 to 90. Ramirez stared at the word alive for a long time. A man missing since 1974, 50 years ago. Now the official suspect in the Ethan Cole case, Cahill said in a low voice. What does this mean for the 3 disappearances in 1974? And the similar ones never reported? Rowley answered immediately. Henry Walker didn't just survive. He vanished from society to live in the tunnel system. And there's evidence he contacted many other victims. No one wanted to say the phrase. But finally, the lead forensic said, this is no longer a disappearance case. This is a 50-year chain of assaults and captivity. The investigating agencies officially drafted the suspect announcement report, preparing a closed press briefing with the FBI and Sheriff's Department. The spokesperson read the conclusion. After analyzing DNA, footprints, witness statement from Brian Keats, and re-examining data from 1974, we have identified the sole suspect with sufficient evidence linked to the Ethan Cole case as Henry Walker, born 1946, missing July 1974. Henry Walker did not die in the desert as previously assumed. He continued living in a nearly 3-mile underground tunnel system in the Mojave. We believe Walker held at least one victim, Ethan Cole, and is likely connected to multiple other disappearances. Walker is currently considered the perpetrator and is being sought. No one in the press room made a sound. A disappearance case spanning half a century suddenly reversed into a declaration that the perpetrator never died but lived under the Mojave for 50 years. Someone whispered in the briefing room, "How did he survive?" "All that time," Cahill answered, voice low, "by taking everything he needed from the people who disappeared after him." The report ended with the line, "Henry Walker, subterranean suspect, captor, armed and active." The Ethan Cole case had now gone beyond the limits of a missing person investigation. It had become a manhunt for a man outside society for 5 decades, in darkness, in tunnels, and in the sunset hours of the Mojave. And the official suspect had been announced. Henry Walker, 50 years after disappearing, now the abductor in the desert. For many weeks after identifying the suspect, every agency continued sweeping the Mojave on the largest scale in regional history. But the results always came back to one thing no one wanted to face. The suspect had not been found. The Mojave was too vast, with too many rock crevices, sand hollows, old tunnels, abandoned mines, and especially the tunnel network where Walker had lived for over 50 years, was only a small part of a far more complex natural system. In a place like this, someone familiar with the terrain, the darkness, and moving in the wind could exist without leaving traces for decades. Investigator Cahill wrote in the report, "It feels like we're pursuing a shadow, not a person." That was not an exaggeration. The drone team was redeployed, especially at sunset the moment witness Keats said he had seen the older man appear. No one on the team believed anything new would be recorded. But drone number 4, just reaching the dune area near the old hatch entrance, made the entire control room stand up. Amid the deep red glow of the Mojave afternoon, on top of a sand hill, a human figure stood motionless. Not a tree shadow, not a heat mirage. A real figure, tall, thin, standing straight, face turned west as if listening to something in the wind. The drone operator immediately switched to closer observation mode. As the frame zoomed in, details began to emerge. The person wore old military clothing, an M65 field jacket no longer used by the military since the late 70s. The fabric faded, darkened as if desert dust had soaked into every fiber. Lower hem, slightly torn, seams worn from time. Left cuff had an old patch, exactly the position described in Henry Walker's 1974 file. The way the person stood was also unnatural. Feet sunk deeper into the sand than normal, shoulders slightly hunched, neck extended forward like the posture of someone who had lived too long in low spaces. The technician brought the drone a few more meters closer. The screen shook slightly from strong wind, but the image was clear enough to send chills down everyone watching. The person on the hilltop moved, not slowly like an elderly man, not stumbling, fast, surprisingly fast on sand that was extremely difficult to walk on. That speed was not like someone 70 or 80 years old, but like someone who had spent half a lifetime perfecting survival in the desert. In 3 short seconds, the figure left its original position, slid along the dune slope, and vanished. No footprints left, no slides, no sound. The drone scanned the entire area in multiple passes, but saw nothing more. In the control room, no one spoke. Everyone understood. Henry Walker, or what remained of that man, was still living. The police decided to show Ethan the video footage for confirmation. They hoped for at least a little more information. When the laptop was opened in front of Ethan and paused on the frame of the man standing on top of the sand dune, he immediately clenched his hands tightly together. His breathing wavered, eyes fixed on the image. After a long moment, Ethan spoke softly, as if his own voice might allow the figure in the video to hear him. He stands like that every time he watches me from the tunnel corridor. Investigator Cahill asked, Ethan, if you saw him again, would you recognize him? He didn't answer right away. Then he lowered his head slightly, voice almost dissolving into the air. If he catches me again, I won't come back. No one in the room replied. No one wanted to press him for more. In that moment, every investigator understood that Ethan wasn't speaking from emotion. He was describing a truth. That man was a primal fear he knew if faced a second time he would not survive. The investigating agencies finalized the closing report. The short but brutal conclusion read, Henry Walker, primary suspect. Status, alive. Location, unknown. Considered extremely dangerous. But in the internal notes reserved only for officers directly involved in the case, they added one sentence that did not appear in the public report. Very high likelihood. Subject remains concealed in the Mojave Tunnel network and continues to observe the area. Case cannot be considered closed. There was no victory statement. No case closed ceremony. No symbol of success. Only the terrifying silence of a desert that never reveals what it hides. That night, the drone left the Mojave near midnight. As the device prepared to return to base, the camera accidentally panned down to a low rock area in the west, a zone never previously considered noteworthy. In the final 3 frames before the battery died, a human figure appeared amid the darkness of the rock field, then vanished behind a large outcrop. No other camera captured that image. No one had evidence to confirm it, but the entire drone team stood motionless in front of the screen. No one dared voice the thought they all shared. The Mojave still has a predator. One who knows how to move without leaving traces. One who appears at sunset and disappears into darkness, as if merging with the desert itself. And he is still out there, standing somewhere behind the sand dunes. Watching. Waiting. The Ethan Cole case closed on a legal level. But no one, not even the authorities, believed the story was truly over. Not when that man still exists. Not when his footprints still appear, where drones fail to record. Not when the Mojave continues to keep its secrets in the late afternoon light. Ethan's words, after everything that was discovered, became the final statement every investigator remembered. He's still out there. And everyone understood that he was right. The story of Ethan Cole is not just a thrilling disappearance in the Mojave Desert. It also reflects very real aspects of modern American life, things Americans frequently face but sometimes overlook. Ethan's vanishing just minutes after stepping onto the Rock Spring Loop Trail, leaving behind a disabled phone, a backpack moved dozens of miles away, and a secret tunnel system no one knew existed, reminds us that vast wilderness, remote transportation networks, and isolation in many parts of the United States can become dangerous when people are complacent or unprepared. Today, as Americans increasingly go hiking, camping, and reconnect with nature, the first lesson is: never treat a desert or mountain range as harmless. Ethan was an experienced hiker, yet he was still drawn into a situation beyond his control. This reflects the reality that every year in the United States, thousands of people go missing in national forests, canyons, and deserts, not because of weakness, but because nature is too vast and humans are too small. The second lesson comes from the discovery of the phone with its GPS deliberately removed using specialized tools. In the age of high technology, many believe their smartphone is their safety chain. But this story shows, relying too heavily on technology can create the illusion of constant protection. In reality, devices can fail, lose signal, be disabled, or simply be insufficient to help rescuers find you in time. The third lesson is about community safety. Henry Walker lived in the Mojave darkness for 50 years, undetected. This shows that even in a modern society like the United States, with advanced law enforcement, surveillance, and databases, there are still gaps that dangerous individuals can exploit. People living in remote areas, especially in California, Nevada, Utah, or Arizona, need to stay vigilant around little-traveled zones and understand that beautiful terrain can also hide unpredictable threats. Finally, Ethan's statement, "If he catches me again, I won't come back," serves as a reminder that psychological trauma does not end when the victim is rescued. In the United States, many survivors still battle PTSD years later. The lesson here is that society must continue investing in mental health support not just to rescue victims, but to help them go on living. From the Mojave to real life, the most universal lesson is: freedom always comes with responsibility and vigilance. And sometimes the most dangerous thing is what you think could never happen to me. If you found the mysterious disappearance of Ethan in the Mojave Desert thought-provoking, please hit subscribe so you don't miss the next mysterious cases we'll explore. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video where more secrets of America are still waiting to be uncovered.